Okay, so continuing on, I realize I'm getting a little more verbose than I planned on. I apologize. So you want to evaluate your facilitation, your training skills. You also want to find a way to assess the training design. What was the learner's experience like going through these different modules? And this can kind of help you to get a sense of how folks generally feel about some of the different pieces. Did they like to be in small groups? What about the lecture portion? How did they react to that? Was that comfortable? Was that the best way to teach? If you can get learners to reflect to a point where they're sharing new ideas, like, well, what if you tried doing it this way? That might be even better. That's really a home run in terms of getting that feedback that you can automatically pull in and say, yeah, that makes sense, I'm going to do it. A caution there, though, you'll get, as I'm sure you've all experienced, rarely do you do a training or do any sort of workshop where everybody just loved it, no criticism whatsoever. You'll generally get a couple people at least that weren't happy with it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. As a general rule, you'll always get those 2 or 3 people who love it no matter what you do, and you get the 2 or 3 people who hate it no matter what you do. So, and that's okay, and I don't mean to invalidate what people on either end say or feel about something, but just to try and not take it too personally, but to learn from it. But my point originally was you don't want to take one comment or one thought from either side of the spectrum and change your whole outlook because of it. You have to remember, you have to look at the whole thing. What did everybody say? Well, almost everybody loved this exercise except Bob hated it. So do I change the whole exercise when everybody else seemed pretty happy with it? Did Bob make some valid points that I could tweak this exercise so that my Bob next time might actually engage a little more? But take those things with a grain of salt, but take them seriously and think them through. I and just some of my colleagues I see often focus on the critiques we get and how do we change it to make it better next time, and sometimes that's the detriment of the larger group. Then the other point that I wanted to make was when you're assessing something, you also want to know how satisfied or how comfortable, happy people are with the training at the end of the day. I would say it's usually goes hand in hand with if they met the outcomes or not. In my experience, those are usually pretty closely correlated. But it's worth asking, if somebody met a learning outcome but they had a terrible experience, or if they met a learning outcome but they hadn't understood that was the learning outcome, that can be pretty telling about how this training was set up, what you need to make sure as a trainer happens next time in terms of pre-communication and things like that, to make sure people have a good experience. The other thing I wanted to mention, you can have conversations and get feedback from a group that way, and I feel like that can be pretty valuable in that you as the trainer then can ask questions like, okay, you said that this part wasn't particularly effective. What exactly was not effective, or how far did you get, or did you understand what the instructions were? Where did we fall down? You can have a conversation, you can ask those questions. And the downside is, not to state the obvious, but some people aren't going to be comfortable sharing their feedback and their critique with you, even if there's really no consequences for them. Even if you were hired to come in and do something and they're the leader or the boss that brought you in, they're not necessarily going to feel comfortable criticizing you in front of other people, criticizing you to your face, or giving you even constructive feedback. So it's wise if you can have pieces of the feedback and the assessment that are anonymous and let people share how they're really feeling without fear of reprisal or fear of just embarrassing you. But it's still not a bad idea to have that space to have a discussion and get some questions, because you can get some really valuable nuggets from both kinds. To kind of close this up, I just wanted to walk through sort of my normal training and workshop assessment and evaluation process. And you'll hear kind of common themes of things I've gone over already. But basically, I kind of have it cut into 3 pieces. So the first piece is for all the participants at one of my workshops, I give them an evaluation and I ask them to tell me how I did. And that covers a lot of these things. Covers satisfaction, covers whether they met the learning outcome. And I ask them themselves, for most of the trainings I do in my day job, I ask them if they met the learning outcome. Can you do this now that you participated in this training? And these are not all intercultural trainings. Most of them are not. They're higher ed trainings and things other than diversity and intercultural communication. But I evaluate, or I ask all my participants to fill out the evaluation, and those I ask for their name. Some people will write their name, most people will, and some people will not write their name. So that gives them a choice of whether they want to be anonymous or they want to share with me who they are. If they share with me who they are and they were particularly unhappy with something, sometimes I'll follow up with them and find out, okay, what could I have done better? Where did we go wrong on this one? Why were you unhappy, if it's not abundantly clear from their evaluation? The other thing I'll do to follow up and to assess a training is to discuss the training itself with the leadership team, or I call them the champion group, the group that decided to bring me and my company in to do this training. I want to have a conversation with them to see if their expectations were met. Excuse me. This is usually just a conference call that I have with people to see how they felt about things. Sometimes if I can't get them on the phone, it's via email, which is a little less effective, but I'll take what I can get. And a word of caution on that, I noticed that with my clients, it's always more difficult to get them on the phone once the workshop or the training is over. I think everybody puts in so much effort scheduling these things and getting everything all set, and on my side, I'm all focused on it. And then after the training, they really don't want to hear from you for a while. They're like, okay, it's over, we're moving, we have to move with this. Whether they were happy with it or not, it's harder to get them on the phone afterward. So, word of caution, and actually I'm kind of teaching myself right now. Probably makes sense to try and set that up before the workshop happens, so you will have your moment to reflect with your leadership group or champion group about how the training went and if it met their expectations. And then the last piece, and probably one of the most important pieces, is with my trainings, a lot of them have outcomes of what they'll be able to do at the end of the day, but we're also setting kind of next steps and what outcomes we have reaching further down into the year. So one thing I like to do is follow up with my leadership team or champion group 3 months after a training or a workshop to see how things are going, how they've used it, how they've applied it, because that's generally the most important thing. That's why they brought me in to do the training, is because they had a larger need and they were trying to get something started, or trying to train a whole lot of people. So you want to know if they've seen the results that were anticipated with this whole training. So follow-up down the road is a great idea. And I think it also, it teaches you a lot about other work to do outside of just the training piece. How do you set up the group for success after the training? And you need to set that up before you deliver the training. You have to be ready to go with that. You have to be ready to position them to move forward identifying people that are going to kind of steward whatever efforts along afterward. In some intercultural communication trainings, you might want to have some diversity champions. Who's going to take this and make sure we don't drop it and forget about it tomorrow? How are we going to put this to best use? So that's the process I use real briefly, and it's worked pretty well. I think there's room for improvement, and I'm always trying to figure out how I can better assess these things and how I can better apply what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing from folks to my pre-work, to my needs assessments, and to my training. So that is all I have for this week. And yeah, I will see you online. I look forward to kind of a good final week, and I'm excited about seeing your presentations on your final projects next week. And just a point of clarification, I'm just asking each of you next week to summarize your final projects for each other and to have some meaningful, thoughtful feedback and responses and questions to each other. So that's how we're going to spend week 10. Your final projects, I don't believe are due till the very end of the week, but you're going to need to do those summaries earlier than the final projects are done. And hopefully, if you get some good feedback from each other and from me, you can incorporate that into your final project as well, if there's enough time to do that. So, thanks very much, and I look forward to seeing you online this week.